Hello, hello. Are we live? Looks good. Welcome back to the Advent of Syntran. Today is day 13. Once again, I've looked at today's puzzle prompt ahead of time. For the first 10 days or so, I usually avoid that. I think I looked at day 9 ahead of time. And then, of course, I looked at yesterday's ahead of time. And now, we're getting to the point where they're difficult enough that I'm always going to look at them ahead of time before the stream so that I can start thinking about it in the background and plan an approach of how to solve it. I mean, it's kind of fun to see me look at the prompt for the first time live on stream, but we're getting to the point where I'm not able to do that. So today we have to find symmetry. Basically, they give us a grid or multiple independent grids, I guess. I'm not sure about that yet. But basically, this line is the same as this line, and then this line is the same as this line. So between these two lines, there's a symmetry plane, and the whole grid above and below that is reflected across that plane. There are some horizontal planes, and there are vertical symmetry planes too. Like this one has a vertical symmetry plane in between these chevrons. So let's save the test input. Let's make a new day. That didn't work. Oh, yeah, I need arguments for new day. Day 13. How is my desktop volume? I'll turn that down a little bit. There's the test input. I should be able to echo that. That didn't work because I named the file wrong. TXT. Okay, there's the test input echoed. Let's get the real input. Also, I want to think about actually making a input downloader. So what is this link? Can I just curl this? I don't think so. Yeah. So there has to be like some sort of command line authentication to be able to get your input, because everybody gets a different input. That way you can't just like watch somebody else's stream and see them get the answer and type their answer into yours and like pretend that you win. Like there's not really a proof of work, but everybody has a different answer, and this is like an anti-cheating mechanism. So I don't know how to log in at the command line. Yeah, I'm not going to spend time on that right now. So for now, I'm going to continue saving these manually. Okay, so how big is this? Okay, every grid is a different size. This one is 15 characters wide. This one is 13 characters wide. I assume they also have different vertical dimensions. And you get multiple grids in one file. The test input only had 2, but this has a bunch. In total, it has like 13,000 lines. Part 1 doesn't seem too difficult. I'm not sure if I understand what they're actually asking for. Okay, so they call this a pattern. Each pattern, so I guess this input has 2 patterns. This is a pattern, then there's a blank line to delimit the patterns, and then there's a second pattern. And what do we have to add up? So the number of columns to the left of each vertical line of reflection. Basically, they're asking for which column the symmetry line is in, but because it's between two columns, they're wording this very carefully to avoid off-by-one errors. So they're asking for the number of columns to the left of the symmetry plane, and 100 times the number of rows above each symmetry plane. Now my question is for the second input, does this count as 5 lines above the symmetry plane, or do I also count the lines from the pattern above that? I think it's just 5. So 4 plus 100 times 5, or 5 plus 100 times 4. I had that backwards. Okay, yeah, so just the number of rows in the current pattern. So I need to parse this file and work on one pattern at a time. I don't have growable arrays like std vector in C++. I don't have growable arrays in syntran. But I think I can have like a maximum capacity, which is hard-coded as like a global constant. And as long as all of my patterns or arrays are under that size, it should be safe. So I think I'll use a hard-coded upper limit like that instead of making multiple passes, because a few days ago, I forget which problem it was. Maybe it was day 5? Yeah, day 5. I would make multiple passes through this file. So I would like read up to here and then open or close and open the file to go back to the beginning, and then read down to here again now that I know how many lines are under this map. That was really a pain. So I'm going to have fixed upper size capacity arrays for this problem, and then I can read them in one pass without doing a first pass for counting and a second pass for saving. So let's get into that directory, move from day 12 to day 13. I want to have some upper limits to the capacity, so I bet 32 will work. And yeah, I'll have to check if these overflow somehow. And I don't have an early exit feature in syntran, so I have to be very careful to check that these don't overflow. So how do I want this loop to work? I want to have an outer loop that loops through the patterns. Hey, Vision for All, welcome back. And then I want an inner loop that reads until a blank line, because the blank line delimits the patterns. Like here we have a blank line in between the first and second patterns. And I think I want this to be inside the inner loop. So this should give me the number of rows in each pattern. Well, that is an infinite loop. Does it not end? It doesn't end with a blank line. Let's double check that. Yeah, so we have a blank line in between patterns, but we don't have a blank line after the final pattern. So that's kind of annoying. That is still an infinite loop. Or, okay. That's not right, because it's saying there's one pattern with 15 lines. Is this actually a blank line? I think so. Can I get the first one? Okay, so if I do that, I count that as 7 lines. Okay, I just have to skip the blank line, so I need to read another line out here. Okay, so we have a 7-line pattern and then another 7-line pattern. Is that right? So 7, yeah, 7 lines and 7 more lines. Okay, I guess that's right. And I think I want a matrix of characters as opposed to a vector of strings. Yeah, because checking for, I don't know. No, it might be easier to work with a vector of strings, because then I can at least compare whole rows at a time when I'm checking for vertical symmetry. For horizontal symmetry, I'll still need a loop to go character by character, and there's not really anything I can do about that without changing the syntran language. So maybe I don't really care about the X capacity. So my pattern will be a vector of strings. And it has this fixed capacity. So then pattern ny will be the string. And then I should be able to print the pattern. That's not right. Equals assignment. Oh. Wow. Good catch. Welcome back to the stream, Dink. Okay, there we go. And then it has like a bunch of empty lines at the end because the 7 lines don't fill up the capacity. So that's the first line of this second pattern. That's the second line. Third line. That seems right. And I also want to check if this overflows. What I should do, I should have an assertion, or I should exit to the system, or I should return early from this function, but I don't have any of those features in this language, so all I can do is print something. Hey, Callie. Hey, Callie. Want to say hi to Twitch? She doesn't really like it when I stream. Callie, don't lick the microphone. Okay, she is laying down right on top of my mouse. You're supposed to catch mice, but not that kind of mouse. Callie. It's weird because, like, when I work 9 to 5, I work from home. When I work at this exact same desk, she doesn't really bother me too much, but when I'm streaming, she just wants to stop me. Okay, Callie, the stream has to go on, Callie. So frustrating when I'm trying to do stuff. Yeah. All right. Unfortunately, I might have to forcibly evict you, Callie. And then if I try to grab the mouse, she will bite my hand. I'm sorry, Callie. The stream must go on. So let's make sure we're not overflowing. Okay, so nothing got printed. The test input doesn't overflow. Let me quickly check the real input to make sure this doesn't overflow the capacity. Okay, So all it prints is part 1. It doesn't say anything about error, capacity overflow. So I think we're safe. Syntran really needs an exit or an assertion or something to stop when there's a fatal error. Or some kind of error handling. Throw catch, return codes, early returns, anything but the current state of affairs. So now we need to check the patterns for symmetry. The easy one is vertical symmetry. I have to be careful what I mean when I say vertical symmetry. I mean symmetry across a horizontal line. And that's easier because I can compare whole strings at a time. I don't have to iterate character by character. I think it's more clear what I mean if I phrase it like that. Symmetry about horizontal lines. Lines makes more sense than planes because we're only working in 2D. So for that we have to find, first we have to find 2 lines that are the same, and we have to iterate through every possible symmetry line. I don't think we'll ever have a case where there are multiple symmetry lines in one pattern, or at least not like 2 horizontal symmetry planes. Or if there is a case, they only want the first. That's unclear. Because, like, what if you have a pattern where every line is the same? Like, here we have 2 lines that are the same, but what if the whole pattern is just the same line repeated over and over again? In that case, every line is a symmetry line. And then, do I count each of those, or do I only count the first one from the pattern? I'm going to assume that there's only one. And if I get the wrong answer, then I'll look for patterns that have multiple symmetries. Also, does row 0 count as a symmetry plane? I think it doesn't count because then everything would have symmetry at 0. Because obviously, like, the whole pattern isn't reflected. Like, we have this line matches this line, but the first line doesn't match anything on the bottom of the symmetry plane. So it's allowed to, like, extend beyond the pattern. And if you allow things like that, you could consider that there's a symmetry plane before the first row. But if that's allowed, then every pattern has a symmetry plane there. So that's like a trivial symmetry plane. So I think we won't worry about either of those. So as soon as we find the first symmetry plane, we will break. And I want to start iterating from 1 because the trivial symmetry plane doesn't count. I have to be careful about off by one errors because there's another trivial symmetry plane below the bottom line. Okay, there's an infinite loop. It doesn't matter though. So, is this really 7 lines? Somehow I've read the whole file again. What happened? Oh, this is the real input. I want to go back to the test input. Okay, so this has 7 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we count this as symmetry plane 0, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We only want to go up to 6 because below the final line, that's a trivial symmetry plane, and I'm not counting it. So I want to go up to ny minus 1 inclusively. Less than ny minus 1. But I think that's 1 too few. If it's not inclusive of ny, then this is what I want, because it's less than ny, not less than or equal to ny. You have to be careful of fence post errors because there's the line of the pattern, but then the symmetry planes are in between the lines. So this is the classic example of fence post errors. So we're going to assume that there's symmetry and then check pairs of lines expanding around the symmetry line until we find a pair of lines that don't match. So to begin with, we're just going to check line IYSym and IYSym minus 1. Golly, you already had one warning. So here's the actual symmetry plane. Let's assume we're checking this. This would be IY1, IY2, IYSym 3. So at first we're going to check line 2 and line 3. And then we're going to expand the search and check if this line matches this line. So first we do 2 and 3, then we do 1 and 4. Two and 3 have a difference of 1. 1 and 4 have a difference of 3. So at every iteration to check matching lines, the difference between the lines that we're checking is going to increase by 2. So I'll call that diff. It's the difference between the line numbers that we're checking for the pair that we're checking. So that's going to start as 1. We're going to check while is symmetric and there's going to be some other condition. I'll have to think about that in a second. And then we're going to compare is symmetric. It will be symmetric if line pattern y sim plus diff minus 1. No, I can't add the diff here. I have to add like half the difference. So what should I name this variable? I want to compare that to IYSim plus half diff. So for IYSim equals 1, and for the first iteration through this loop, half diff will be 0 and IYSim will be 1. So this will be 1 minus 0 minus 1, so that would be pattern 0. And then this will be 1 plus 0, so 1. So first we'll compare pattern 0 to pattern 1. Then the second time through this loop, we're going to increment the half diff. Then this would be out of bounds, so I have to have a bound condition in the while loop. And I think I just have to repeat this expression. I have to have this expression twice, no matter how I do it. Either I have to have it in the body of the loop and in the condition, or I can assign it to some variable, but then I have to save it before I enter the loop and update it inside the loop. I could have a function that gets this, but I think that's overkill. I'll just have it twice. So basically this has to be greater than or equal to 0, and this has to be less than ny. So if any one of these conditions occurs, then the lines that I'm checking are outside of the pattern. And I don't want to check there. That would be an out of bounds array index. I think that's it for the horizontal line symmetry. How do they phrase the puzzle prompt? And this is only if this is true. So I should get 1 for this pattern, but I shouldn't get anything. Wait, do these both have horizontal symmetry? Yeah, I think they do. Wait, no, they don't, because this line is different from this line. So if you're only looking at these 4 lines, it looks like there's symmetry. But then you get to this line and it's broken. But this one does have symmetry at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there should be 4 lines above that symmetry plane. 4 rows above it. Yeah, so what I'm expecting is 4 for the second pattern and nothing for the first pattern, because we're not checking for the other symmetry direction yet. That doesn't work. Oh, I forgot a semicolon. Okay, so we have a horizontal line of symmetry at y equals 4. That's correct. Okay, now we have to look for symmetry about a vertical line, so reflecting in the horizontal direction. And that is a little bit more difficult because I have to iterate character by character. Like what this line is doing, it's comparing one whole string to another whole string for like a whole line at a time. But when I look in the other direction, I have to iterate character by character because I don't have a string that represents a column. I only have a string that represents a line. So I get lucky for this case. So we're gonna sort of manually copy and paste this, but every y is going to change to an x, and then we're gonna have to add the character iteration. Found is already declared, so I don't have to declare that again. I don't think I have nx. Nx is just the length of each line. That's not right. I have another infinite loop. Yeah. Okay, so the x is 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that's right. And I get that for both patterns. Okay, now we have to fill in this while loop. Now that we have nx. So I don't know if I really explained what half diff is. Like if we're comparing this line and this line, the half diff is, does it start out as 1? It starts out as 0. So it's really like the half diff off by 1. So if we're comparing this line to this line, the difference between those lines is 1. Then if we're comparing this line to this line, the difference between those lines is 3. So every time we expand the search while checking symmetry, that difference increases by 2, but the half difference only increases by 1. So that's why I'm incrementing that by 1. And the easiest way to avoid off by 1 errors is to deal with a half difference instead of the total difference between the line numbers. And now half difference is the column difference, not really the line difference. So we're comparing pairs of lines, or rows. Rows are lines. It's half diff times 2 plus 1. So that's why I call it half diff, because it has to be multiplied by 2 to actually get the difference, right? Because it's subtracted from this one and it's added to this one. So it's half of the difference. And now we're going to compare columns instead of lines. And isSym is going to be a little bit trickier, but at the end we're still going to increment half diff by 1. So now instead of doing like a one-liner, I need a loop that loops through every y position. Because if I'm comparing two columns, I have to compare every y position or every row of both columns. So I need a loop here because I can't really transpose the string. My strings only represent rows. I don't have a string that represents a whole column. For I, y, can I reuse I, y? I don't think I'm using I, y at all. Yeah, so this is going to iterate through the rows. That's just 0 to ny. And then isSym. Now we're just going to compare one character at a time. Yeah, this is annoying. So I have to work around some syntran limitation. I don't really have a good way of extracting a single character out of a vector of strings. So first I have to get one string extracted, and then I have to extract a character from that string. Oh. I thought I had to get two strings, but I only have to deal with one line at a time. And now we're going to compare the characters. So ixsym minus half diff plus 1, and compare that to ixsym plus half diff. And I actually want this to be a while loop, because as soon as I find something that's not symmetric, I can break out of this inner loop. So I have to increment it manually if it's a while loop. Callie, you're going to get one more warning, and then I have to close my door. I'm sorry. She's hungry too. It's her dinner time in half an hour. And is symmetric. So as soon as I find something that's not symmetric, I can break out of this loop. And also break out of this loop, because the same condition is here. Now, if we get to the end of this, then we will have detected a vertical line of symmetry, or symmetry yeah, vertical line of symmetry. And what are we expecting? For this input, it should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Should be at x equals 5. Where? Oh. Okay. I can do it inside this loop. There's an infinite loop. Oh. No, I incremented half diff. Which loop is infinite? Oh. IXSym. I forgot to increment IXSym. And I also want to set found because I want to break out of the loops if I find a symmetry plane. So I need to do that in 2 different places. I need to break here and set found equals true. You could probably combine this variable and this variable somehow, but I'm afraid I'll introduce a bug if I try to do that right now. So I also have to do that here. And I think this should have fixed my infinite loop. Well, that's not right. It should be 5, not 4. Vertical line at 2. That can't be right. In the puzzle, yeah, they start counting from 1. Well, it's a fence post error because think about the symmetry line is in between the lines of text. So there's a plane above the first line or above line 0. And then the first line that you have to check is between the line of text 0 and line of text 1. And yeah, they basically refer to this as 1, not 0. But is that... I got this one right. So if I was off by 1, I would expect both of these to be wrong. Also, how am I getting symmetry at 2? That doesn't make sense. Like this line is definitely not symmetric at 2. Kelly. Come on. Give me a second. All right. I think I have something wrong here. Why am I iterating like that? Am I extracting the line correctly? So this is the pattern. We find a horizontal line of symmetry, that's okay. Then we start checking for symmetry about a vertical line. So we look at 1. It should already be false here, because we should look at the first 2 characters and see that this one line isn't symmetric in the first 2 characters that we compare. So why is it looking at dot dot? IXSym is 1. This is the line. We should compare hash and dot, not dot dot. So IXSym is 1. Half_diff is 0. So this should be 0, and this should be 1. Why do I get dot dot instead of hash dot? And why do I only compare 1 pair of characters? That part's okay. Yeah. Because this is inside the loop that loops through lines. 3 and 2. No, 2 and 1. Did I? IXSim is 1. Minus. That should be -1, not +1. So I mistyped that. Maybe I should have copied and pasted instead of doing that manually. So vertical line at 5. I think that's all we need. Now I have way too much stuff getting printed, so I have to turn all of that off. Okay, vertical line at 5, horizontal line at 4. That's all we need. Now we do like 100 times one of those plus the other one. I can't remember which is which. So we add those to the sum. So it's 100 plus this one. And it's just plus this one, not times 100. But it's x, not y. I think that's it. What are we supposed to get? 405? 405, is that right? 405, okay, let's try the real input. I'm feeling good about this. I think part 2 is going to be hard, unless we got lucky and the whole day is easy today. Alright, that's part 1. I'm gonna refill my drink and feed my cat, and then I'll come back and do part 2. So I will be right back. Alright, let's check out part 2. Hopefully it's not too bad. This is kind of long. I don't like that. Yeah. Okay, so a dot could become a hash, or a hash could become a dot. It could go either way. So this is like error detection. Second pattern, the fifth symbol in row 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think they mean, yeah, I think that was a helpful hint, Vision, for all that. They're counting from 1 for everything. So it's not just my interpretation of like the fence post errors, but like they're actually indexing everything by 1. So I think I would have read this paragraph many times over trying to figure out what the hell they were talking about. But yeah, they mean this character, and then what is that? That gives us a horizontal line of symmetry? No, because it would give us a horizontal line of symmetry. Yeah, like this. Okay. So now instead of checking for exact matches, we have to look for things that have one character different. Now, remember that we have nested loops. So one pair of lines can have one difference, but then the other lines should be the same. This is a bad example because you only check 2 lines and then you're out of bounds. Like line 3 doesn't get compared to anything because that would be like the line above the first line, but there is no line there, so you only have to check 1 pair and then stop the comparison. So that's a bad example. But this is a good example because we check more than 1 pair. So we check these 2, that's an exact match. We compare this one, it's really hard to select 1 line. We compare this one to this one, and that's an exact match. Then we compare this one to this one, and there's a difference of 1 in exactly 1 pair of lines. And then this one doesn't get compared to anything because of the out of bounds thing again. So out of all of the pairs that we compare, there has to be exactly 1 line with a difference of exactly 1. And then we flip that symbol. I don't think we have to actually do anything with like the symbol or like the line index or the row index or column index of the symbol that gets flipped. We just have to find the line that would have a difference of 1. That doesn't sound too much worse than part 1, but I have been working on this for an hour already, so I didn't think part 1 would take me that long, but here we are. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste, and then I'm going to turn off the debugging from part 1 in that order, because I want to keep the debugging turned on for a second. So this is part 2, and we're not going to call part 2 yet. I want to turn off the debugging. Let's go back to the test input too. Okay, so that's the test input. I really didn't do too much debugging, but I want to turn these off for part 1. Okay, now part 1 is less verbose and it just gives us the answer. Now let's call part 2, and that will still be verbose. Okay, now instead of looking for exact matches, we have to look for symmetry planes that give us a total difference of 1 out of all of the compared rows and columns. Am I using the word diff anywhere? No, I was using diff, then I had to rename this to half diff because that's what it is. Now I want to like keep track of the number of characters that are different, and if I end up with like a total 1 out of all of these nested while loops, then that's the pair that's a close match. This doesn't seem that hard. Now instead of isSym, instead of a Boolean, we're going to have like an integer. And if the difference ever becomes greater than 1, then we can break early in that case. So am I in part 2? Yeah, I'm in part 2. I didn't want to accidentally start editing part 1. So diff, maybe I want to call it dist. I don't know. It's going to be confusing no matter what I name it because you're going to think it's related to half diff, but it isn't. I think this comment is still okay. I won't delete that. Now, instead of checking this Boolean condition, we're going to check diff less than or equal to 1. Because if it's 0, we can keep searching. If it's 1, we potentially have a close match and we can keep searching. But if it's ever greater than 1, we can break this search because it's more than just a smudge. It's a significant difference. So this will change. So this is going to be an if condition. If I think it has to be like this because I don't have a not equals operator for strings. Then diff plus equals 1. And now this will be if diff equals 1. So this will be a close match instead of an exact match. And I'm glad I had this separate Boolean because I want to keep this around and break the outer loop now. So I was thinking in part 1 of combining the found Boolean with the is symmetric Boolean, but now I'm glad I have separate Booleans. I think that's it for the horizontal ones, and then I have to do the same thing for the vertical ones. So diff equals 0, and then diff less than or equal to 1. Is that what I did? Diff less than or equal to 1. And I have this condition twice for this check because of the way that character matrices and string vectors are inconsistently indexed in syntran. And then this is if not diff plus equals 1. Is that the same as what I did earlier? Yeah, if not equals diff plus equals 1. I think that's correct. And then if diff equals 1. I don't actually need parentheses here. Let me be consistent about that. I don't remember what we were expecting for the test input. It doesn't parse. I need extra parentheses. So here's what I mean. There is no not equals operator for strings. Not yet. This should be easy for me to add, but like I just haven't. Wait. Did that work? I don't trust that. I'm pretty sure this operator doesn't exist. But what I do need are parentheses. I need that here too. 200. That's not right. So I'm always finding near horizontal lines. Oh, because this is comparing whole lines. Yeah, so this one is not right. Now I do have to iterate character by character. So instead of this, it's going to be like a copy and paste of this, but X and Y are going to be switched. Yeah, this one's going to be annoying. So all of the X's and Y's are going to be swapped. But now I need two different lines. Right? So I need line 1. Yeah, the indexing is totally different here. I can't remember what I just changed, so I have to undo everything. Copy, comment, paste. Okay. Now I have this that I'm going to edit, and I always have the original that I can look at for comparison. I can get rid of all this debugging stuff. That's not really important. I can get rid of blank lines. Okay, so almost every X is going to get replaced with a Y, and vice versa. But this is different because I need to extract two different lines as scalar strings, not string vectors. So like this is going to be the first line. No. This is going to be the first line. And then this is going to be the second line. I need semicolons. Now we're going to iterate through the columns of both of these lines. So we do that by iterating over x. And this comparison is a little bit easier now. So I increment x at the end of this loop. And this comparison is now just if not s1 ix equals s2 ix. I think that's it. Will this work? 400. I think that's the right answer for the test input. 400 is the right answer. Let's try the real input. $23,000 and change. Fingers crossed. Okay, that wasn't too bad. That was an hour and 18 minutes. Part 1 took me a little bit longer than I would have liked it to take. It didn't seem like it was that hard, but it just takes me time to do things and to work through stupid bugs. Yeah, part 2. It would have been easier if I had a better way of handling character matrices or vectors of strings. The right way to do this would be to use character matrices from the beginning. And then I would have had like a more consistent approach for parts 1 and part 2 and for checking for vertical lines versus horizontal lines. But I thought doing a vector of strings would be a shortcut because it did make part 1 a little bit easier. Like part 1, when I was checking for symmetry about horizontal lines, this is all it takes. You compare the whole line at a time, and you don't have to have another nested loop in here to compare one character at a time. So I thought I would save myself work that way, but it might have ended up being more work because I had to do it anyway for part 2 and compare character by character. Ideally, I would have constructs in the syntran language to compare whole columns of a character matrix and whole rows of a character matrix. Like, let's say like you have a rank 2 character matrix of spaces, and like it's 5 by 5 or some size. Ideally, I would be able to compare rows like this. If I want to compare a row, like let's say compare row 2 to row 3. So row 2, all of the columns, compare that to row 3, all of the columns. Ideally, this would be a Boolean operation that's possible, or like maybe I need like an all intrinsic function. This is basically how you would do it in Fortran. If you had a matrix of characters, you could use like this colon as a slice to like extract a whole row or extract a whole column. And then if you want to do the transpose of that, if you want to compare, what did I say? This is comparing rows. If I want to compare columns, then I would have like colon, comma, 3 instead of 3, comma, colon. And this would be like the transpose of the line above. So ideally, I would have a language where it's this easy, but I just haven't gotten that far in Syntran yet. This is where I want to go. I want to make Fortran-like syntax and MATLAB-like syntax possible in Syntran, but I haven't gotten that far yet. Yeah, so I'm not there yet. That's the plan. Maybe by next year's advent of code, I'll have that implemented. The difficulty is that like this slice is a contiguous section of memory. So one column, I think I might have columns and rows mixed up here. So row, column, well, it's sort of a conceptual thing of what you consider a row versus column. It's abstract, and memory doesn't really have rows and columns. But one of these is contiguous. In syntran, this one is contiguous. But this one is not. There's like a stride where you have like a character, then you skip the rest of the column, or the rest of the column, and then you have a character in the next column. But they're not consecutive characters in memory. So it's non-trivial to implement. Anyway, I think I've done enough talking. Let's just get this committed. Maybe I'll clean it up first. I want to leave these prints in here. These should never happen though. And if they do happen, what you have to do is, this is actually part 2. What you have to change is you just have to update the capacity here, if that overflows for any reason. But for my inputs, it's fine. I think most people's inputs are roughly the same size. I know everybody gets a different input, but what's our max line length? Like 17, maybe? They're really not that different in size. Yeah, so my longest... Well, that's the X dimension. What's the Y dimension? I don't know. It's probably around 17. So I don't expect anybody's inputs to be twice as big as mine. So I don't think you'll have capacity issues. Okay. Are those still correct? I changed some stuff. Let me double check. Doing okay. I've only missed 2 stars yesterday. I missed the second part of day 12 and the second part of day 5. Are those answers still right? 33780, 23479. Cool. All right, after I verify that this pushed, I think I'm gonna end this stream. Day 13. Yep, here's the code that we wrote. All right. Overall, not a bad day. I finished a couple days in less than an hour, so I wasn't that fast today, but not super difficult. All right, that's it for today. I will catch you next time.